Hello, everyone. How's everybody doing? I hope you're doing fine. And as you know, I'm on vacation, and I'll probably be back next week or the end of this week. And so today we're going to have a little powwow here, a good get together. We're going to be discussing, hopefully, some interesting subjects. And so let's get to it. Last week we covered subject matter, which was objects. What is an object? And we had a little bit of problems with the differences of opinion that people have out there. Most people use essentially the notion of object of ordinary speech. That's the problem. And so, how did I start? Well, I started by saying that we need this, which is what I call the golden principle, the golden principle of physics. Physics requires an object. You can't do physics without an object. What does that really mean? It means that, essentially, right, that you cannot move a concept. You cannot say you're going to move a concept in physics, and you cannot. Yeah, you can only move objects. That's the bottom line. That's the big one. Okay, and what we've been doing for maybe the last 400 years is been moving concepts. We've been transferring energy, which is not a physical object. We've been moving a mass, mathematical concept. Um, we've been working with particles, which are not particles. They're vibrations of fields, bundles of energy, you name it, anything but a physical object. And space time, we've been bending space time, okay? So the explanations, the physical interpretations that we've had from mathematical physics, from the so-called scientific establishment, uh, are devoid of objects. So the question is whether any of those physical interpretations, relate to physics, okay? If that's science. Okay, so the word object, I defined it as that which has shape. Very simple. And you would think, well, that's a very simple definition. Certainly, someone in the last 10,000 years has already figured that one out. I mean, how complicated can that be? And it turns out that nobody has. In the last 10,000 years, no one has figured out that an object is that which has shape. And again, you can go to any physics textbook and you won't find any of them that begin by defining the word object, even though, as the golden principle just said, you need an object to do physics. So you would think that the first thing that a physicist would define, Newton, Einstein, you name it, Bohr, Heisenberg, the first thing that they would do is define the word object and then continue and build upon that. No one has done that. Okay, no one has defined the word object. And so what we have today in official so-called physics, mathematical physics, science, is an informal term. And that's what people use, informal terms. Okay? Now, just to give you an idea of where I stand on the word object, I have a little saying, and I say that the definition of the word object destroys all religions. Let me say that again. The definition of the word object destroys all religions. And you might say, well, how so? And I'll give you an anecdote to show you how powerful that definition is. Okay? Again, you don't have to believe me. I just want you to understand the argument. Okay? I was in Aberdeen, Scotland. I was giving a dissertation over there in one of the universities. And I met a group of Palestinians, Muslims. And as all, Muslims, they try to get across their religion And we went to dinner all together. There were like 5 or 6 of them, and very nice people. And we started talking about religion. And so I asked them at one point, and I said, "Is God in? Does God have shape, or does God lack shape?" Very simple question. Is there a shape? Does God have a shape? I mean, it's a black or white type of question. I would think, right? Well, one guy answered. I remember a couple answers. That's what I want to share with you. The first one guy answered. He said, "Well, if I knew what God looked like, God wouldn't be so great." Okay, that's not the first time I had heard that, and but that is a standard reply that you will get out there, right, from people who are religious, right, who believe in God and so on. Okay, so they'll give you this kind of answer, and it's a cop out. They haven't answered the question. I'm asking simply: does God have shape or doesn't have shape? You're God. How do you visualize God? When you sleep, when you pray, whatever you do, what do you think of God? And so by saying that, well, if I knew what God looked like, he wouldn't be so great. And I'm not asking if God has a beard, blue eyes, a magic wand in his hand. I'm not asking that. All I'm asking, does God have shape? God doesn't have shape. If he doesn't have shape, the problem is that he's an abstract concept. There is no he. God becomes a concept because that which has shape is an object. That means God is not an object. God is a concept. And so these people end up praying to a concept. Okay, so there's a big danger. No matter how they answer, they're going to lose. They're going to have a problem, okay? Now, another fellow answered, he said, what was it? He had answered what? He said, because I asked him if he prayed to a concept, right? And that's where they realized what the question was about. They were able to see deeper, what the issue was. If God is an object, he can create things. We can talk about a he. But if God is a concept, what is God? Just a concept? And it turns out all concepts were invented by man. All concepts. We've invented the concepts. And so that would put God in a position where God does not, is a creation of ours. But then there was another problem, and that was the problem of existence. We can only talk about the existence of objects in physics. And that was another big problem for them because, does a concept exist? Well, in ordinary speech, we say love exists, intelligence exists, data exists. We use all concepts and we say they exist. But we don't have a definition of the word exist to fit in with that statement. In physics, it's very simple. Only objects can exist. So if God is not an object, if God does not have shape, God does not exist by definition. And so when I pointed all this out to them, that's when they realized what the question was about. That's when they came back and they said, I see what the question is. Okay. Anyways, why am I raising this? Well, today I'd like to start with the word exist. We're going to be dealing with the word exist probably in the next 2 or 3 sessions because I'm not sure I can get it done today. And I'm going to be dealing specifically with Ayn Rand. She was a philosopher, and she was an atheist, by the way. Okay, and she defined some words, among them the word object, the word exist, the word knowledge, several words which we use in physics. And so I'd like to address some of those issues and show the contrast between Ayn Rand and myself. And some people made comments saying, that they thought that she was, essentially saying the same thing as I did, but in different words. That's what they were saying. And I've been, over the years, the last 10 years at least, many people came around and said, yeah, you said the same thing as Ayn Rand. And no, I didn't. So if people think that I said something similar, even remotely similar to Ayn Rand, well, we got to clarify those issues. I got to show the contrast between Ayn Rand and myself, because I don't agree with Ayn Rand in absolutely nothing. Okay, so we got a problem. Someone's not understanding what Ayn Rand said or what I said. Okay, one of the two. It can't be both. Okay, so I'd like to address that. But anyways, there was a comment before that, and this had to do with the word object again. I put it as that which has shape. And this individual, he put this comment. He said, I'm going to just blurt out what comes to mind, listening to this soap salesmanship, okay? Is my shadow an object because it has shape? And it's a question many people have asked. A lot of people want answers to. I mean, if you're going to say shape, is a shadow an object? Okay? I think it's a valid question, because at least lots of people have that question. So I think at least we need to answer it, right? Okay. In my opinion, form is a better qualifier, but I guess that's not new and improved by the speaker, moi, and would allow the first step of a soap sale, trashing existing ideas. Yeah, I'm going to be trashing existing ideas because they're not scientific. That's the reason. So getting back to the question, is a shadow an object? Because shadow would seem to have shape, right? Okay, so here's my answer to that. And I did cover this in the past, but I'm going to go over it one more time, okay? And that's what an object is not, okay? This is what an object is not, okay? And here's the list, and I just want to point to the last one there on my list. An object is not an object is not that which is not standalone. In other words, an object, in order to be an object, has to be the only object in the universe, has to stand alone. If God created a box and then he disappeared, that box is the only object in the world, in the universe, then that box, made of a single piece, by the way, then that box is an object. Why? Because that's the way we present objects in physics. We point and name. We point and say table, okay? And that's an object. And you point and you say door or chair or whatever. You can point and name. And so now the ET, the extraterrestrial, he understands our language. He begins to understand our language. He says, okay, I know what a table is now, because he pointed and he made this sound called table. Or maybe I wrote the word and he read it and he said, okay, that's a table. Okay, but I point and name. But it's got to be a standalone object. And the question is whether the shadow stands alone. Have you ever seen a shadow without the tree? Have you seen a shadow without the house? Have you seen a shadow without you or a rock or whatever? A dog or whatever creates the shadow. Or light coming in there. Let me show you a shadow. I'm going to show you a 3D shadow here. Several of them, in fact. It's known as a hologram. This is a shadow. Okay, it's a 3D shadow. It's a projection. Now, you say, well, I see a shape in there. So it looks like that's an object. I see a bunch of shapes there. But see, the little creatures there, all these things that they're showing you there, all those are objects. Here's Princess Leia. I think that's her. And here's an ant or whatever that is, a turtle. Here's a jet, okay? All these are objects. A jet is an object, and that is an object. I'm saying the hologram is not an object. A shadow is not an object. Shadow is a projection of light, and so is a hologram. So the question is not whether, the objects that you see there, the ones that have shape, whether those are objects. The question is whether whether the word hologram represents an object, whether the word shadow represents an object. That's the issue. And no, a shadow is not, because any shadow is a projection of something else and does not stand alone. Any hologram is not an object, the hologram itself, okay? The pixels, essentially, Superman is an object. Superman is a figure, it has shape. But the projection on the screen, the real objects are the pixels, the colors, the screen. Those are the objects. Those are the ones, in fact, that have location. Each one of them, I can establish a distance with respect to my chest. Okay? But Superman, out there's no physical object called Superman, standalone object called Superman. Superman is a projection, like all cartoons. I don't know, Sylvester the cat, Bugs Bunny. Those are not objects. Those are objects, but not. But the projection, the image that you get there is a projection of light. That's the one we're talking about. We're talking about the shadow, the hologram. Okay, the image that you're projecting. That's what is not an object. And some people have trouble wrapping their brain around that, but that's the issue we're talking about. Shadow is not a standalone object. But is there a shadow of a tree? If I put a shadow of a tree on the wall and say tree, yeah, that object, that shadow there, if I call it tree, then it's an object. But if I call it shadow, it's not an object. Make sense? Think about it. Okay, so that's the first issue. Okay, now here I have this lady Ayn Rand, and I put her on a list the other day. And it was, she was next to the last there, Ayn Rand, 1905, 1982. And I said, none of these philosophers, from Confucius all the way to Simone de Beauvoir, and obviously I just picked out probably among the most famous philosophers throughout history that dealt with the subject in one way or another. Some were physicists, some were philosophers, and they tried to figure out, well, what is an object? What do we mean by exist? And they never figured it out. In fact, it's David Hume and Immanuel Kant, the two on the right there at the top, who specifically stated the problem. They could not figure out the difference between object and exist. Okay, and I covered that, a couple statements that they made in their books, their respective books, in which they could not tell the difference between an object and existence. Because a lot of people are thinking that a thing is what we call things in ordinary speech. Things that we see every day, we bump against, we touch. So we have this notion of see, touch, and we say, well, I can touch a table, that's an object. And I can touch a chair, so we have no problem there. The problem comes when you get objects that you cannot see, like air. You say, well, that's not an object. Yeah, but you can touch it. You move your hand and you feel something, and we call that thing air. And so are we going to dismiss it because we can't see it? Is that the criteria we're going to use, see? And then you have, objects such as tribar, or even a square, any two-dimensional object, Superman, two-dimensional figure, right, image. And you can see it, but you can't really touch a square because it doesn't exist, it's not here. And so you're going to dismiss it because you can't touch it? You can see it, but you can't touch it. Air, you can touch it, but you can't see it. Are those the criteria we're going to use? Well, obviously, those are not universal criteria, especially the table I'm thinking of, the one that I have in my brain, what I'm imaging and I can see and I can draw for you, right? So that you know what I'm talking about. You can't see or touch the table that I have in my head. Well, is that table the one I'm dreaming of or thinking of? Is that an object? Does the word table refer to an object? Always. Anywhere in the universe. Table on the other side of the universe. Is that an object? Does the word table refer to that which is an object? Yeah, of course, always. Table is always an object. Okay? Why? Because it has shape. That's why it belongs to the list of words that refer to that which has shape. That's why it's an object. So if someone says a rope, oh, you're doing rope, in my case, the rope model. And they say, well, you're doing it with concepts because I can't see, I can't touch the rope, so it's a concept. No, that's not the criteria. Or the criterion. Right? No, a rope Anywhere in the universe, anywhere, anytime you use the word rope, you're referring to an object. Okay? So these people never figured that out. They thought that objects were only those things that exist, and they started confusing object with exist. They got ahead of themselves. Before defining object, they were already at the point where they were saying, well, if it doesn't exist, it's not an object. No, that comes later. We're not there yet. We're not at the word exist yet. We're still fighting. We're still struggling with the word object. We got to define that first. That's the first word you need to define. So yes, I stand by my statement. The word object destroys all religions. Once you define the word object as shape, lots of people have problems because now you got space-time. Well, is space-time an object? Well, what does it look like? What is the shape of space-time? Well, what is the shape of time? Let alone space-time. And no, they put it beyond our reach. They say, well, it's we cannot imagine space-time because it's four-dimensional, a four-dimensional object. Well, I just want time, that one leg, what does time look like? You're going to bend time, you're going to say you're going to warp time. What does time look like before you warp it? That's what I want you to draw it. I want to see what you have in your mind, okay? Field, is a field an object? Can you bring a field? Magnetic field will do, Can you bring a magnetic field to the conference and put it in the middle of the room and show us a field, and we can look at it from every side? We can see, oh, I see what a field is now. Is the field a standalone object? Can you bring the field without the magnet and put it in the middle of the room? What are you going to put? It's a dependent object. Dependent, it's got to be independent. This one's not independent, it's dependent, depends on the magnet. That's one issue. The other one's invisible, untouchable also. So under the C-touch criteria, you still would not be able to qualify a field as a physical object. So all these words that people use as objects, they treat them as objects, are not really objects. They're concepts which people have reified, concretized. They made them into something concrete, and they treat them as physical objects. They start moving them around, they push them, they squash them, they stretch them. That's the problem. Okay. Some people made a couple comments. Again, I've had comments about Ayn Rand over the years, and here's one comment, okay, that came up lately. And one visitor said, Rand herself was at the very least close to saying the same thing as you, just expressed in different terms. No, absolutely not. We got a problem there, and I'm going to clarify all that, right? Science studies concrete objects. No. And I made that same error in the past. I've corrected it, so I want people to be clear on that. The word studies is a problem. Science doesn't study anything. You can study all year and not know anything. You cannot explain a single thing. You can, study birds. You can study for the test and fail the test. So is studying science? Studying is the wrong word to use to define science. Science is not about studying. Science is about explaining. You need to explain something. That's how you show that you know, okay? And does it study concrete objects? Well, not according to the new version of science that we have now, okay? The new version of science says the following here, okay? Science is divided into two branches. Science is about explaining rationally, and there's two branches. One is physics, the other one is philosophy. Physics studies objects and causes and mechanisms, and philosophy deals with concepts and deals with reasons and purpose. So we don't just study, we explain, okay? And in the case of physics, yeah, you need objects, concrete objects. That's physics. But in philosophy, we don't use objects. Philosophy, we need to know why someone did something, the reasons. It could be psychiatry, it could be history. Okay, you can talk about why Napoleon went to Waterloo, in 1815. What was what went through his mind? What was his purpose? Okay, so that's an explanation. Different people have different theories. Okay, Ayn Rand then continues, and she says objectivism. That's what her philosophy is known as. She placed too much emphasis on mathematics, unlike you. Yeah, and that's the problem because as you see in the next statement, many OIsts, many objectivists, right, are indoctrinated by the modern physics of quantum. See, if you make emphasis on mathematics, you end up with quantum mechanics, which is an irrational theory. Why? Because the explanations are irrational. Okay? So the issue here is that when you introduce mathematics into science, you end up with, especially into physics, right? You end up with irrational explanations because mathematics has nothing to do with science or with physics. Mathematics is just a description. An equation is just a description. And that's not what science is. And science is what? An explanation. It's not the study of, no, it's an explanation. You have to explain something. Whether you philosophy or physics, you got to explain something. That's how that's where science vibrates. That's where you use your brain. So mathematics ended up with quantum mechanics, and quantum mechanics tells you some weird things like, a particle can be at two places at once. Decoherence. What is that? What do you mean a particle can be at two places at once? And then this visitor also said, you are doing epistemology, whether you like it or not. No, I'm not doing epistemology. I'm not doing ontology. I'm not doing philosophy. That's not what I'm doing. Let's get it right. Let's at least understand what I'm trying to do here, okay? That's important. What I'm trying to do is lay the foundations of physics. That's different. Every discipline has to have a foundation, okay? You have to have the words. To do law, you need to know maybe what crime is, or what stealing is, or what punishment is. To do medicine, you might need to know what disease means, or what illness means, or what cure means. In physics, we need to lay the foundations. The foundations is first that you need an object, and then you have all those words right underneath there: something, nothing, concept, distance, location, exist, and motion. Those are sine qua non words that you need to define for the purposes of physics. So no, I'm not doing philosophy here. This has nothing to do with philosophy. It has to do with laying the foundations for physics so that we can explain how Mother Nature runs her shop. That's what it's about. Okay? And then this person continued and said, let's see if I can get it here. Let me get this one out. This person says the following, says, Ayn Rand just wasn't as definite as you about existent object. No kidding. Certainly wasn't at all. In fact, she didn't define object, and because she didn't define object, did not know what an object was. She ended up not knowing what exist means. And, she talked a lot about existence, as I'll show in a little while, right? Probably not today, but next couple times I will be talking about existence quite a bit. And it did make the distinction between existence and that which is product of consciousness, concepts. No, because in fact, this same person later on says that concepts exist. So she did not make a distinction. And I'm going to go over that as well. Ayn Rand was not able to zero in on the difference between a concept and an object, not that precisely. And because of that, she did end up saying that concepts do exist because she was using the definition of ordinary speech, the informal definition of exist. She had no real definition of the word exist. And we'll get to that. Okay. Here's another couple comments also by a couple people. And it says, you do not understand her and likely refuse for political reasons. Swallowed a lot of smears against her, calling her a narco-capitalist. I'll get to that as well. Okay, that is downright irrational and subjective. Given your past communist beliefs, it is no surprise. Now, I want to clarify. I was a communist for at least 20 years of my life, throughout my youth, essentially. And I got out of that. I'm no longer a communist by no means, but and I laugh at my youth. You make errors when you're young, and that's One of the errors I committed, I confess. Okay, but no, it's what I'm going to talk about. Ayn Rand has nothing at all to do with politics. Believe me, and I think I'll clarify that in the next, whenever I get to them. Right. Not really sure why you are having such a strong reaction against her. Well, I'm having a strong reaction because I disagree with everything that Ayn Rand said. And not with respect to politics. She did a lot of politics and economics, that sort of thing. I'm not talking so much about that. I'm going to talk about how her foundations for physics were not, they're made, they were set on quicksand. She was building this on quicksand. That's how she built her structure. Okay, and again, I'll get to all that. I'll go one by one. I'm just setting now the tone, the what the issues are. Okay, so that's the point right now, and narco cap, that's got to do with anarcho capitalism. And for short, I call it narco cap. Okay, and I got a couple friends. Shamu and Dave, and they beat me up on that because they are narco caps, and we do have a lot of the debates with them on the new wave. This is the Austrian School of Economics, and how free will enters the decisions of humans, or should enter the decisions of humans. How you have to get government off your back and have essentially free will, the free will to think whatever you want, say whatever you want, trade whatever you want without having the government come in there and tax you and compel you and put a gun to your head and that sort of thing. And yeah, I have a lot to say about that, but I don't want to get into too much politics because I really do physics, okay? But that's what narco cap refers to. Okay, and right off I can see you have strong feelings against laissez-faire capitalism. I'll talk a little bit about that. I have no problem with laissez-faire. It's really a different angle altogether. So it's got nothing to do with that. I got as much against laissez-faire capitalism as I have against communism as I have against any political system today. I don't care what political system you are, I'm against it. Okay, and I'll get to that. And then I think another fellow says here, I suspect you and her have very different political views. Yeah, a little bit. We differ a little bit with Ayn Rand, okay? And I said, but you and her have several agreements on, say, metaphysics. That's where I want to get to. No, we don't. We have no commonality whatsoever on metaphysics, on what is known as metaphysics, okay? And here's a definition of metaphysics to put that into the proper context. Okay, this is, I think I got this either from the Wikipedia or from dictionary.com, one of those two. The branch of philosophy, okay, right there we're talking about philosophy. I don't do philosophy. That deals with the first principles of things. No, the first principles of things are the foundations of physics. Okay, if we're going to talk about things, the first principle is that you need an object. That's the first principle. And metaphysics has nothing to do really with that. Essentially, they treated metaphysics equal to epistemology, equal to philosophy. And no, I don't do philosophy. I set the foundations of physics, including abstract concepts such as being, knowing, identity, time, and space, except for space, which somehow enters the realm of physics. Not really, only as a contrast, right? Being, knowing, identity, and time have nothing at all to do with anything. We don't use those words in science. Sorry, okay? So anyone who uses being, knowing, identity, time, consciousness, anything like that, we get rid of. We don't deal with those things at all. They would regard the question of the initial conditions for the universe as belonging to the realm of metaphysics or religion. Yeah, metaphysics is religion. That's what metaphysics is. Anyone doing metaphysics is doing religion. You either do foundations of physics or you do religion. And then you have abstract theory with no basis in reality. That's what metaphysics is. So as you can see, none of that pertains to me. I don't do metaphysics. Now, people like to call it metaphysics. They got that word from Aristotle, his book is, one of his books is known as Metaphysics. And that's like a philosophy. That's what throughout the ages, they considered it philosophy. And again, they're dealing with the foundations of physics, which they never established. So this is the issue. The issue, we need to clarify all that very carefully, because that's where the problem is. If you're going to write a book, for example, on physics, and you don't lay the foundations, you're not going to have good physics. Your theories are going to be screwed up. And then you can say, well, that's philosophy, that's ontology, that's epistemology, and that's metaphysics. No, you need to lay the foundations like you would for medicine, for law, or for any other discipline. You need to lay the foundations of the discipline. And I got a good example. One of them is biology. A lot of people say, oh, I'm a biologist, they say. No, they can't be a biologist on planet Earth, not today, because they never defined what life is. Nobody knows how to define the word life. And so I had to go in there. I'm not a biologist, but I had to define the word life for them. And so, yeah, we got a problem, because these people, without defining the foundations of their discipline, they just start ranting, and they just go in there and they say, okay, let me talk to you about biology. How can you talk to me about biology if you don't know what life is, and biology is the study of life? How can you be a biologist? And this is the issue. The issue is that we need to lay the foundations for each discipline. That's not called philosophy. That's called laying the foundations of the discipline. And that's what we do for physics. So no, I don't do metaphysics. I despise the word. I hate to be called a metaphysicist. And so on, what is that? No, I lay the foundations, period, for the discipline. It's for physics. We're done, Okay. Here's another comment. Again, all of this is to put all of the discussion within the proper context. Okay. Let me get in here. The comment said, she was a philosopher, referring to Ayn Rand, right? Therefore, she dealt with concepts. Okay. Philosophers deal with concepts. Is that an excuse? Her theory of concepts begins with perceptual level entities. Perceptual? In science, we don't perceive anything. We kill the observer. Science functions like a mafia. The first thing we do is we kill the witness. There are no witnesses, no observers in science. We have to run we have to explain how Mother Nature runs the universe in the physics branch, right? And we have to look at it as a clockwork universe. We have to get rid of living entities. We have to get rid of us and all animals, anything, plants also. Get rid of anything that's alive. That way it doesn't distract you. We need to explain how the universe works without any living entity giving you its testimony. It's when we introduce perceptual that we get into trouble. See, touch, hear, taste, smell. Is that what makes the universe run? It's whatever I hear, it's whatever I see, whatever I can touch. Is that how the universe runs? Well, that is for you. How about for me? You touched God, I didn't. So you believe in God, I don't believe in God. And who's right now? So the problem is introducing an observer. We got to get rid of the observer. We got to know if God exists independent of the observer. If I need to believe in God for God to exist, then God's got a problem, because the day I die, God dies with me, right? I mean, he existed only because I believed in him. We have to know what exists independent of life, because it's the word life, the living entities that get in the way. We put the observer in there and say, well, what did you see? What did you think? Well, I don't know. I was on drugs that day. I had cocaine in my system. So I had all these dreams, and I saw reality. No, you didn't. You had something in your brain. You got to look at it in that way. You got to remove the observer. Remove the observer. Whenever in doubt, remove the observer. What exists independent of the observer? That's what we're trying to figure out. We want to know how Mother Nature runs her shop. For that, we have to figure out those invisible entities that she uses to do gravity, light, magnetism, electricity, atomic behavior, and so on. Okay, you are a physicist, thus only concerned with concrete objects. Primarily, yeah, that's true. Physics is not philosophy. Yeah, that's true. But your approach to physics is highly philosophical. Again, we go back into philosophy. No, it's not. It's laying the foundations of physics. You are a physicist concerned with only concrete. She was a philosopher who grounded her ideas in concretes to go from what is to what ought to be. If you're going to talk about what is, what exists, we're not talking anymore about philosophy. Now we talk about physics. Anyone, any person using the word exist in any shape, way, shape, or form has stepped the boundary over into physics. I don't care if you're the Pope. The Pope wants to talk to me about existence, right? He's crossed the line into physics. He wants to theorize about existence. He's no longer talking about religion. He can't say, well, I'm not a physicist. That's not a cop. That's not a way to excuse him. He comes in there, he tells me his theory, you say, well, but I'm not a physicist, so don't take my theory seriously. Is that what I'm supposed to think about that? I'm supposed to dismiss his theory because he's not a physicist? Is that the excuse? No, a person who uses the word exist in a scientific context, in a dissertation, when he's trying to theorize, he stepped the line over into physics. He's now in the realm of physics. Now we're going to treat him, with the rules of physics. And that is, we need to lay the foundations of physics and of rationality and so on and so forth, okay? So yeah, it's no excuse. I put it in a different way, and I'll say it right now so that you know where I stand on this. Ayn Rand was a physicist. She was not a philosopher. She was a physicist because she was trying to lay the foundations of physics and did a very, very lousy job in doing that because she never figured out what an object is to begin with. She never realized that you need an object to do physics to lay the foundations of what she was trying to do. She never was able to define the word exist because she didn't define the word object. And of course, once she had all this quicksand as the foundations, moving around, then she tried to build her philosophical and political and religious views on that quicksand. That's where the problem is. So we have to go not to her opinions about politics and economics and all this other stuff. That's, for me at least, it's irrelevant. The point here is she never laid the foundations of physics, even though she insinuated that she knew what an object is and what she called it an entity and what existence is or means, and she didn't. And we're going to go over that. Anyways, here's another comment. Just going through the issues so that you know what to expect here. And I'm going to get beat up real bad here. I know that's the way it is, There is, however, no conflict in what you say about physics with Ayn Rand's theory of concepts. In fact, her views support your insistence on definitions and objects being that which has shape. No, she didn't. She did not state that, and so I'm going to address that. To exist is to be something, okay, no kidding, which can be perceived. No, absolutely not. We don't use the senses. We kill the observer. So anything that is called perception does not deal with physics, does not deal with science. It deals with religion. It deals with opinion. And opinion is the definition of religion. Religion is not belief in God or disbelief in God or any of that. Religion is opinion. Okay? You have an opinion, you have subjectivity, that's called religion. Science is objective. You explain a mechanism so that someone understands it. In fact, you do better than that. You make a movie of it. And there's no subjectivity. You just look at it and say, okay, I understand the mechanism you're proposing. That's different than saying, well, I believe, this is my opinion. That's different. Objects exist as do concepts. Absolutely not. Concepts do not exist except in ordinary speech. In physics, concepts do not exist. So if God is a concept, God does not exist by definition. Okay? In ordinary speech, God can be a concept. You can call him a spirit. You can say God is love. You can say anything you want. No problem. We don't care. But in physics, In science, you cannot say God is love, but God exists. No, not in physics, because we have definitions. And we have definitions not that you agree to. We have definitions which you defend with shield and sword. You have to defend your you have to get in the ring and fight for your definitions. Okay? That's how it works in science. We don't just go in there and say, well, let's agree to disagree and let's continue. No, no. In physics, there's only one man standing. Okay? We can't have two definitions for the same word, not for the critical words that form the foundations of physics. Concepts do not exist physically. Yeah. Whatever physically means. In science, in physics, physically means an object, a thing. It doesn't. The word physical does not mean what it means in ordinary speech. In ordinary speech, people think of physically as matter, as three-dimensionality, as something you can touch or see, or that's the notion of the word physical, or physically in this case, in ordinary speech. That's not what the word physical means in physics. In physics, physical means a thing, an object. A square is physical. A circle is physical. You say, oh, that hurts my ears, my mind. Yeah, it hurts because in physics we only have black or white, on and off, or off, yes or no. It can't be both. There's no maybe. It's got to be clear cut. And so either the word represents that which has shape, or represents that which doesn't have shape. And so physical is a synonym of structure, of thing, of body, of entity, of medium, of object, of thing, anything, something. All those words mean the exact same thing in physics. So when you say physical, you're not talking about the notion of ordinary speech of see, touch. No, physical simply means it has shape. That's all it means. The word physical, that's all it means. Concepts exist as mental entities. Well, not in physics, no. There's no such thing. We have to define the word exist in order to know whether concepts exist, period, right there. We got to put a period there. Concepts exist? No, not in physics. Okay? And, okay, so I guess that's that for that. I don't think I have any other, yeah. So let me get on with where I was going to start today, which is, who is Ayn Rand? And here we have Miss Ayn Rand. Mrs., I think. She was married, I think. She was a screenwriter, started in Hollywood. She was an author. I think she was an actress in a couple movies, I think from the silent era. Author, philosopher, physicist, I call her, because she tried to lay the foundations of physics, just like Hume, Wittgenstein, all these people. They all tried to lay the foundations of what they thought was philosophy. No, they were trying to lay the foundations of physics. What exists out there? Exists belongs to physics. Atheist, okay? Some say that she was atheistic and not atheist. In other words, an atheist is someone who tries to convince the theist that God does not exist. And she was not a person to, as far as I know, to try to convince others, like, free will, you believe in whatever you want, I'll believe that God does not exist. So she was more or less like that. She was she was more into free will than in trying to persuade others about her non-belief in God. She was an anti-communist, anti-Marxist, anti-Soviet. She was Russian originally. She was born in Russia, came to the United States, I think when she was around 20. And she obviously hated Stalin and his whole regime. Okay. You could say she was libertarian, Austrian. She had a fight with von Mises. Von Mises loved her anyways. She had a struggle also with Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre, who got the Nobel Prize and declined it in 1964 for his philosophical views on what? Existentialism. Okay, and so they didn't all agree, but they all loved each other because they had their own little debates there. Okay. But none of those three ever figured it out. As far as I'm concerned, von Mises, Austrian school, same thing. I'm going to have a lot to say about those people. And I'm going to get beat up by a couple of my friends there for sure. They're going to come in and beat me up. Laissez-faire capitalist. She was a free willy, as I call her. And I call her a narco cap because I put all these people in the same boat. Anyone from Marx, Buchanan, for me, they were all the same today. Today, I can put them all in the same boat. Keynes, uh, Milton Friedman, von Mises, I put them all in the same boat. They have nothing to do with economics. Economics is Mother Nature's economics only. Mother Nature's economics is food. Every animal that ever existed on planet Earth was an economist. The only thing that, economics is the management of resources. The only resource that every animal, including humans, ever managed is food. It's known as the natural economics. Okay, and von Mises, all these people, none of them dealt with food, and so I got a big difference with all these people. Okay. Anyways, I'll be getting to that later on, but really towards the end. So let's get started here. Let's go with. Oh no, here I have her works. Okay, this is what she wrote in her life. And she said, "We the Living, The Fountainhead, Atlas Shrugged." Atlas Shrugged is probably her most important work. Okay, it was a novel. She had other works of fiction there, as you can see, and then she had some nonfiction where I'm going to pull stuff to show what her way of thinking was. Okay, and okay, so that's where she puts her stuff. What do I propose in exchange? Well, I got my stuff somewhere else. I've got it in 2017. I put it in the Second Reformation. 500 years since the Martin Luther put his thesis on the doors, 95 theses on the door of a church. Well, I did the same thing at the doors of Cambridge. I put my 95 theses there. There's a video, so you can look it up. Martin Luther Bill. Okay, you'll find it out there. You'll find also my stuff in youstupidrelativist.com, my site, where I ridicule mathematical physics and the explanations we have today for almost any phenomena, invisible phenomena. And then, here you'll see it also in my book. It's known as Why God Doesn't Exist. So these are the sources that I'm going to use for my arguments against Ayn Rand. Okay. Okay. So that's pretty much the introduction, and that took up the whole time. So what I'm going to do is, before I can get into the analysis of Ayn Rand's definitions and how they pertain to physics, as to the foundations of physics, I'm going to open the floor for questions, and then I'll see you next Sunday. Okay, that's probably when I'll be back home and I'll be able to continue with this line of thought. So let's see what kind of questions we got from the audience today. Okay, one person says, God has no shape. Well, if God has no shape, he's not an object according to physics. And if God does not have, if not an object, then God does not exist by definition. And it means that God is a concept and all concepts were created by man, which means that we created God. We're done. Essentially, that's the reasoning for that, okay? Machinery is just decentralized, widely distributed spatially and temporally. Does this constitute shape? If some manner of machinery is just decentralized, well, I'm not sure what the issue is there. Again, I did put up there that extension is not a definition for object. Okay, so if that's what this individual was referring to, distributed spatially, meaning stretched out, stretching out is not the definition of object, because again, stretching out means that you're going with your eyes from one place to another. You have motion in there, and you have an observer. Shape means that the thing has shape, even though there's no human to analyze it, to see it, to smell it, to touch it, to see it, to taste it. Okay? Okay, let's see, what else do we have? What do you call the hard problem of consciousness? Well, I'll just be blunt as I possibly can. We treat anyone who uses the word conscious or consciousness as a mental problem. He's got a mental problem, okay? So we don't use the word consciousness or conscious, and we get offended by that word. So please don't use that four-letter word in my presence, because I'm going to use a baseball bat and give you a good answer. Consciousness does not belong to science. Okay, anyone dealing with the words consciousness, you should go out there. In fact, I've got a little drawing in somewhere in one of these, but I guess I'll present it next time. But consciousness, people are introducing an observer. That's what it is. They're trying to introduce religion, opinion. They're trying to introduce biases. And so we do not use anything related to the word conscious or consciousness. And as you will see later on, I'll show you that Ayn Rand, talked a lot about consciousness and conscience and conscious, being conscious. And that's where we differ radically. We don't use consciousness for anything. We treat people who use the word conscious or consciousness or conscience as religious individuals. Okay, so we don't deal with that word. God could then be anything from a galaxy scale phenomena to an AI deep underground acting. Yeah, God can be anything you want it to be. It's up to people. It's up to the person giving the presentation, to the person talking to the person giving the dissertation. That's the person who has to tell you what he means by God. What does God mean to him? And if he's going to say God is an object, please draw him on the board. I want to see God. And if he says, no, God does not have shape, then God is a concept. And I guess that's what you're praying to a concept. Okay? So maybe you're praying to a spirit. Spirit is a soul. Soul is a concept, and that's what you're praying to. And I'm not sure what kind of response a concept can give you, Okay. Okay. She said concepts don't exist. Not really, Arthur. She did say concepts exist, and I'm going to show that. I'm going to use her own words against her, okay? She did not know what an object is. She did not know what exist means, especially exist. And so I'll be talking about that. But today we ran out of time. I just wanted to present the case for those who follow up in the next couple of installments, episodes, okay? Okay, someone answer. Okay, let's see if I can find something I can answer here. Definition of life, someone says. Okay, I wasn't going to talk about that today, but yeah, I do have that in my book, and I can share that with you. Someone says, you wrote the definition of life. Yeah, I did. And someone says, where was it? Someone else says, definition of life, please. Okay, so I'll answer that question. Yeah, life. I wrote the chapter 8 in my book deals with the word life. What is life? Okay, and so yeah, let me share that with you. And again, I'm not a biologist, but I think I defined the word life. Okay, objectively, scientifically, in a way that you can use it consistently, meaning you can use it rationally. What is life? I can't put it up there, but I'll just say it, okay? Life. We don't define the word life, we define the word living. We need to know what living and alive mean first. Okay? Let's start there, and then I'll work my way up to the word life. So we start at the word living, and we start at the word alive. Those two essentially are synonyms, and so what's the definition of that? That's an object. Okay, listen carefully. It's an object that moves primarily against gravity, has the ability to move against gravity. A rock cannot move against gravity by itself, right? We can throw a rock up in the air and it moves against gravity, but not by itself. Okay, and it's got to be a natural object. That it's a longer definition. I'm just giving you the quick version here, because also part of the definition is not really that it moves only against gravity, but against the path of least resistance. That's a better way of putting it, okay? So an object natural object. That's another discussion. But a natural object that can move against, primarily against gravity, but against the path of least resistance. Okay, so a rock is carried by the wind, by volcanoes, by whatever, by a man who throws it up in the air, whatever. Okay, um, but a living entity can move against that. Any living entity, even a starfish, which doesn't seem to move. Okay, and there are many issues there. First, we got to find out what the system is, because that's a problem a lot of people don't understand. That in order to know whether my hand is alive, are you talking about me or are you talking about my hand? You got to identify the system. That's one issue. A big problem, because a lot of people get that all confused, especially devil's advocates. They say, oh, what about your hand? Is your hand alive? And it moves against gravity. And so, no. Are we talking about the hand or are you talking about Bill? Okay, so that's going to be one issue. Another one is people say, well, is fire alive? Fire can go up. Well, fire is not a thing. It's got to be a thing. It's got to be an object, a natural object. Fire, you can say it's natural, that no problem there, but fire is a combustion. It's a process. It's not a thing. People don't understand that. In the old days, the Greeks thought fire was a thing. No, fire is not a thing. Fire is a concept. It's a dynamic concept, combustion of air. That's what it is. There's no fire out there, at least in the middle of space, okay? Because there's no air to, fuel it. So there are many issues that have to be clarified for people to understand completely what alive and living mean. Okay, so I'm just giving you the short version here. It's that which moves against gravity, that can move against gravity. That's life. Okay, and now, yeah, we can define living as the set of the collection of, or all the things that are alive. Okay, that's essentially what living means, and or life means. Life is simply the collection of living entities. That's the quick version. Okay, that's the quick version. There's a lot of questions on that issue, because a lot of people say, well, what about this? What about that? And, I can't go over all that right now. All I'm giving you is the quick version, that which moves against gravity. That's the bottom line. And it's got to be a natural object. Can't be a toy car or an airplane, because those are not natural objects. Okay, they're secondary objects. And again, this goes on and on and on. There's a lot of questions on the word life, and I've been through all of them. And so, all I can do is share that someday with you when I talk about life. But right now, that's the short version. Life, that which moves against gravity. Okay, let me continue here. Let's see if anyone has other questions. So definitely light is alive. No, light is not a physical object, not light. The rope is a physical object, okay? The rope is a physical object. And the question is whether it moves against gravity or moves against something. So yeah, it's a long story. Again, I'm sure there's going to be a million questions, and I'm not going to get into the life issue right now because it's too lengthy. I've had millions of questions on the word life, okay? And of course, a lot of people disagree because suddenly, they get jolted by the definition. They say, oh, what about this and what about that? And so it goes on and on. Okay, Grant said, I like that, interesting definition. Okay, let's see if we got anything else. That's moving against path of least resistance. Okay, now I got a million questions on life. Magnesium burns underwater with no air. Yeah, but burns is a process. Burns is a process. We're talking about objects. Again, it's very hard. Again, I'm not going to go into all the details. I'm sure you're going to have a million questions. So I'm not going to answer on life anymore. I'm just giving you the short version right now. Okay, that which moves against gravity. And you got to think a lot about this and really get into the discussion of each little phase of life to really understand the concept. Okay, folks, I'm going to cut it there, and you can leave questions. You can drop questions. You can do it here on YouTube, but I prefer that you do it at Patreon. You do not have to donate or anything. Just got to register there, and you can leave questions. I always try to answer as many questions as I possibly can in that site. Okay. Okay, folks, so we'll see you on Sunday, next Sunday. Hopefully, I'll get back to normal. I'm out of vacation. I'll be back to normal by then. So we'll see you then. Bye bye.